On December 11, 1972, astronaut Gene Cernan climbed the ladder of the Apollo 17 lunar module, became the last human being to stand on the moon, and left. No one has been back since. No one has even left Earth orbit since. For 54 years, every crewed mission in history, the Space Shuttle, the International Space Station, every astronaut who has called themselves a space traveler has stayed within roughly 250 miles of Earth's surface. That changes with Artemis 250 miles of Earth's surface. Not because it lands on the moon. It doesn't. But because for the first time in more than half a century, 4 people will climb into a spacecraft, leave Earth orbit behind, travel 250,000 miles into deep space, loop around the far side of the moon, and come home. That gap, 54 years, is not a footnote. It is the entire context of this mission. The crew of Artemis 2 carries an unusual weight. Commander Reed Wiseman leads the mission, with pilot Victor Glover, mission specialist Christina Koch, and Canadian Space Agency astronaut Jeremy Hansen. When they leave Earth orbit, 3 of those 4 will make history in ways that have nothing to do with the moon. Glover will become the first person of color to travel beyond low Earth orbit. Koch will be the first woman. Hansen will be the first non-American. Every human being who has ever traveled to the moon, all 24 of them, across 9 Apollo missions, was an American man. Artemis 2 changes that in a single flight. This is not a detail. It is a statement about who deep space exploration belongs to. The mission itself is not a landing. That distinction matters because it explains why this flight is being flown at all. Artemis 2 is a test mission, the first crewed test of the Space Launch System rocket and the Orion spacecraft under real deep space conditions. The ECLSS stands 322 feet tall and generates 8.8 million pounds of thrust at liftoff, 15% more than the Saturn V that carried Apollo crews to the moon. Orion sits at the top, a 16.5-foot capsule built specifically for lunar distance travel, with upgraded life support, modern avionics, radiation shielding, and emergency systems that Apollo never had. After launch from Kennedy Space Center's Launch Complex 39B, the same pad used by Apollo and the Space Shuttle, Orion will perform a translunar injection burn, a precisely timed engine firing that sends the spacecraft out of Earth orbit and toward the moon. The trajectory being used is a hybrid free return path. This is an engineering decision that deserves explanation. If Orion's propulsion system fails after the translunar injection burn, the spacecraft does not drift helplessly into space. Earth's gravity will naturally pull it back. The crew splashes down safely without firing a single engine. The safety architecture is built into the trajectory itself. The 10-day mission will carry the crew farther from Earth than any human being has ever traveled. At closest approach, they will pass approximately 5,000 miles above the lunar surface before looping around the far side and beginning the return journey. Behind the moon, all radio contact with Earth cuts off completely. No signal from mission control. No voice from Houston. For a period of time during each orbit, the 4 astronauts aboard Artemis 2 will be entirely alone in a way that no crew since Apollo has experienced. How they manage that isolation, operationally and psychologically, is itself a data point NASA needs before committing to longer, more ambitious missions. The systems being evaluated during those 10 days span the full range of what deep space flight demands. Orion's Environmental Control and Life Support System, known as ECLSS, will be tested under real operational conditions for the first time with a crew aboard. It scrubs carbon dioxide, regulates temperature, manages pressure, and recycles water. None of that has been validated with humans at lunar distance. Radiation exposure will be monitored in detail. Beyond Earth's magnetic field, the crew will encounter particle radiation from the Sun and galactic cosmic rays at levels no astronaut has faced since the Apollo era. Understanding how that exposure accumulates over the mission will directly inform medical planning for crews who eventually spend weeks or months in deep space. The single most closely watched technical event of the entire mission happens at the end. Return from the moon means hitting Earth's atmosphere at approximately 25,000 miles per hour, nearly 40 times the speed of sound. At those velocities, the heat shield is not a backup system. It is the only thing standing between the crew and temperatures approaching 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. During Artemis 1, the uncrewed test flight that flew the same trajectory in 2022, engineers discovered unexpected damage. The heat shield's Avacoat ablative material had cracked and broken away in areas that pre-flight models had not predicted. NASA spent years investigating the root cause, identifying it as a permeability issue in the material that trapped hot gases, causing sections to fracture under re-entry heating. Rather than replacing the heat shield entirely, NASA made a different call: adjust the re-entry profile to reduce the thermal stress on the existing shield. That decision is accepted by the crew. Commander Wiseman has said publicly that he and the crew reviewed the analysis and support the path forward. But the heat shield is not a solved problem. It is a managed one. The watch continues. Artemis 2 is also the first major milestone test for the broader architecture that follows it. Artemis 3, currently targeting 2028, aims to land 2 astronauts at the lunar South Pole, the first crewed lunar landing since Apollo 17. That mission depends on SpaceX's Starship being ready as the human landing system. Starship's lunar variant requires in-space refueling from multiple tanker launches, a process that has never been demonstrated at full scale. Delays in that development have already introduced uncertainty into the timeline. Blue Origin has been contracted to develop a separate lander for later Artemis missions. Both represent a structural shift. Artemis is not a NASA-built program in the traditional sense. It is a combined government and commercial effort where NASA provides the rocket and capsule, and private companies provide the surface access. That model has never been tested at human lunar mission scale before. Further out lies the Gateway, a planned orbital station in lunar orbit intended to serve as a staging point for surface missions and eventually as a refueling hub for Mars-bound spacecraft. None of that infrastructure exists yet. Its existence depends on Artemis succeeding incrementally, beginning with the test flight that is not yet launched. The cost and sustainability questions are real. The ECLSS costs in the vicinity of $2 billion per launch and is expendable. It flies once and is not recovered. Critics have questioned whether that cost structure can support the cadence of flights Artemis requires. Those concerns are legitimate, but they exist in the context of the alternative, another 54 years of Earth orbit. The Moon is not just a destination. It is where the technologies for Mars will be tested, where radiation environments will be measured, where long-duration autonomy will be validated. When Artemis 2 launches, 4 astronauts will become the first humans to leave Earth orbit since the month the Bee Gees released Saturday Night Fever. That is the gap. What NASA learns from those 10 days about the heat shield, the life support, the radiation, the navigation, the humans sitting inside that capsule as Earth shrinks behind them will determine whether the next step beyond the Moon becomes possible within this generation. Artemis 2 is not the return to the Moon. It is the proof that the return is actually within reach.